Okay, ready, thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday, January 26, 2022. This is the meeting of the City of Providence City Council Charter Review Commission. We're going to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Chairman John Igliosi,
Present.
Vice Chairman Oscar Vargas,
Present.
Councilwoman Carmen Castillo,
Present.
Commissioner Brian Principe,
Present.
Commissioner Nina Pande is absent. Commissioner Mackie McCleary is absent. Commissioner Tiana Ochoa, present. Commissioner Robert Risi,
Here.
Commissioner Dr. Wayne Montal.
Present.
We have 7 present and 3 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
2 absent, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everybody. Let's also, for the record, we have Ken Chiaverini from the Deputy Solicitor City Solicitor's Office present. We have Councilwoman Helen Anthony present. We have Councilman John Goncalves present. And of course, we have Deputy Majority Leader Mary Kay Harris present. The first item, Madam Clerk, is, I'll let the record reflect, by the way, that Commissioner Nina Panday is present. Do you want to, first item?
Sure. So I'll introduce myself. My name's Caleb Horton. I'm the city archivist. I've been working with the city archives in different capacities for 8 years, but I was appointed in 2016. And I'm pleased to present tonight a history on the city charter and governance in Providence. I will wait for Claire to put the screen. So to begin, the title of this presentation is "To Henceforth Be Known as a City, the History of the Providence City Charter." These were the words spoken by Mayor Bridget, our first mayor of Providence. In 1832, Providence was incorporated as a city, and this is our first city charter. This is when the formal city council was formed, but I will get into that in a little bit. I think to begin to really appreciate where we've come as a city, we need to begin with our founder, Roger Williams, the founding era.
Well, he has the phone.
I like that. You can proceed to the next slide. Oh, and that's a copy of our city charter. 1832. It's in the display case in the hallway, so I encourage you all to check that out. Third floor. The founding era. So let's begin with Roger Williams. As we all know, Providence was founded in 1636. But why was it founded? Roger Williams was a bit of a Renaissance man. He was a linguist, a businessman, a lawyer, a politician, and a minister. Roger Williams settled in Salem prior to 1636 and practiced as a minister there for a small congregational church. Williams had to leave Salem because of his radical ideas. One of his ideas was the freedom of religion, to practice your own faith in your own privacy. In fact, he was going to be arrested by the Massachusetts Bay Colony for uttering the words to his congregation, "Forced religion stinks in the nostrils of God." That was heresy. Essentially, the Puritan church was a church state. It was heads of church ran it, and there was no separation between church and state. So Williams had to leave. He was going to be arrested, dragged away. His fate was unknown. He gathered his things and left his family and escaped into the woods. And he stumbled his way into what's now known as modern day Raynham, Massachusetts. There he met Massasoit. He was a sachem for the Wampanoag tribe. Williams, being the linguist, one of the few Englishmen at the time that was fluent in Algonquin, could communicate with the tribes. He stayed there for the winter and he left in 1636 in the springtime. He was met with 13 other proprietors who believed in his message of separation of church and state and religious freedom. They crossed the Seekonk River and they met the sachems Myantinomi and Canonicus. There, they made an oral agreement to establish a colony. So this was done as an oral agreement, but Williams understood English law at that time. And to establish a settlement, he needed a deed. So he drafted one in 1638, 2 years later. You can go to the next slide. Although this is not a charter per se, this is document number 1. This is the first document that outlines us as a colony, as a settlement, the settlement of Providence. I've heard the argument before from historians that Rhode Island wouldn't be anything without Providence, and Providence wouldn't be anything without Rhode Island. Providence was the first. This was the establishment. This sets the basis for our government. The town boundaries established by this document extend from a point just above the Pawtucket Falls on the north-southwesterly to Newtoconnet Hill, your ward, then southeasterly to the mouth of the Pawtucket River. The Blackstone, Seekonk, and Providence River serve as the eastern boundary. And as you can see there, Canonicus is the bow, and Myantinomi is the arrow. And again, this document is in our founding documents displayed outside of this room on the 3rd floor. In special temperature controlled case. Feel free to check it out. It's in both Spanish and English, the translations, with more detail. But I felt this was necessary to include because this really establishes us a foothold in the New World. In 1636, again, as I mentioned, Providence with its 13 proprietors and agreements, the town would be governed sectorally. A vision shared by Williams and his followers, that the foundation of governance must be founded on the separation of church and state. You can proceed to the next slide, please. So this leads me to document number 1. I would say this is our first instance when we have an established form of government written down. It doesn't look like much. It's a paragraph, but it's monumental. And we have it in our city, in our archives, in our display case upstairs. This is the first document in the New World that says governance and only civil things. I'll reiterate what's on the screen. The town meeting on August 20th, 1637, Williams and the settlers who brought their families to Fallen and laid out an agreement for a system of government. Williams divided up the land, relinquishing his role as the sole proprietor. Therefore, his political control, by signing the settlers agreed to subject themselves, in quotes, and active and passive obedience to all such orders and agreements as they shall be made for public good, only in civil things. And as I mentioned here, perhaps more important was in the civil compact, but was left out. It was the first document in the New World to omit the subjugation of people under the church. And this is a big deal. There's a great book written by historian John Barry called Roger Williams and the Creation of the American Soul, who goes as far as to say that Roger Williams could possibly be our first founding father, coming up with this idealism. And this spirit, I believe, carries through our history up to present day. So I believe showing these founding documents is very necessary in providing a backdrop to where we've come and how far we've come. And you'll see we have plenty of trials and tribulations. We are by no means perfect, but I think that spirit shows through, especially with these founding documents. And by far, I think this is by far the most important document. It's one of our collections. So now we have a 1648 town charter. We have a charter. Before this occurred, Providence was its own colony, followed by Shawmut, which is present-day Warwick, followed by Portsmouth, and followed by Newport. Williams, in 1642, found out a civil war between the Parliament and the King began in England. So why does this affect us, right? Well, Roger Williams sailed to his homeland to obtain a parliamentary patent to ensure the survival of the colony amidst the instability of the crown. Basically, Rhode Island was in danger of losing its colonial status and being swallowed whole by Massachusetts Bay, which was constantly trying to find ways to basically wipe us off the map, so to speak, to take control. As I should put it lightly here, the Puritans would call Rhode Island the latrine of New England because of all the miscreants that went to Rhode Island. Although I'm proud to be part of that latrine because we've established these fundamental principles that we so cherish today. So I say to the Puritans, good day. So Williams needed a charter, and he got one in 1644, a colonial charter, which established Rhode Island as a colony. So Rhode Island was a union of 4 towns, and it grew over time. So Providence wasn't an independent colony anymore, it was part of Rhode Island. Hence the name Rhode Island Providence Plantations during that time period. So in 1648, the town of Providence and its original proprietors and several others had grown exponentially at this point because other people were coming into Rhode Island to escape mass and to practice their belief in separation of church and state, religious freedom of different faiths and backgrounds, including Quakers. So they needed to establish some kind of more sedimentary form of government. So if you want to put the Providence, next one. The Providence Pre-Corporation was the original founders. So these founders during this era would meet every 2 weeks. The property owners and heads of household met to discuss civil matters and agreements reached by the majority when forced. It was said the early town meetings were held under a sycamore tree near the present corner of College and South Main Streets, and sometimes would be held in Rogers' own house and inclement weather or one of the proprietors. There was no really town hall, that comes later, and probably at the top of another discussion. So next slide. So what is proprietary government? This was the foundation of the government in that time period, and it was far from perfect. At first, it was there was a form of direct democracy. There were no representatives, there were no councilmen per se yet. Each had a household, and the property owner would meet, and they would discuss what they needed to discuss to pass legislation and for the betterment of the town. The propriety incorporated in October 8, 1638 governed the town, including the first settlers, as I mentioned, in Rhode 1650. The proprietors, again, majority vote, decided the inhabitants' proprietorship, the right to vote, town meetings. The proprietors were admitted as the landowning freemen. So in city documents, you'll see this, and you will see this in the early legislation that is passed. The freemen would decide the votes, and they were originally proprietors, but as the government grew, they became the landowning class, and the other persons were received as townsmen. They didn't usually own land, they weren't heads of household. So it was far from perfect, but this was the system in New England, in the New World at that time, throughout the 17th and 18th century. So we go to the creation of the town council, and this is when the passage of the 1648 charter. After the passage of the town charter, the town government consisted of a town council of 6 men, a town clerk, a treasurer, a constable, and a sergeant. Councilors were elected by free men, and the system would continue until 1842, until the Dorr Rebellion, when a new state constitution eliminated the property clause to vote. So again, a not perfect system. And city's government up past 1832 with the enactment of the 1832 corporation in the charter. You had to own a piece of property. And I mentioned the Dorr Rebellion, which is another topic of discussion that would take a long time to discuss. But it was a chartist revolution in Rhode Island. And what came out of that was a new charter that got rid of that land stipulation clause. Feel free to check out the City Archives website. I might as well plug it now. I have an article up there about the Chartist movement in Providence and black suffrage in the African American communities during the Door Rebellion. That goes into great detail about this. But that property clause was removed, and your average person could vote at that point. They had to pay a dollar poll tax, I believe. So that was the creation of the town council. And this goes on for quite a bit, to the 18th century, early 19th century. You will find a theme that, and it runs through everywhere in American history. There is always a catalyst, an event for change. So we're not always proactive, sometimes we're reactive. So something called the Snowtown Riots happened. It was a large riot in late September of 1831. There was a dispute between white settlers and the black citizens living in the Snowtown section of Providence, which led to the confrontation in which 3 sailors were wounded and 1 was killed. As a result, a mob of 700 to 1,000 formed, and then for the next 3 nights, raised a number of buildings in the neighborhood. And the state militia was actually called in before order was restored and 4 people killed. This rocked the town council at that time. The town was growing. It was really not a town anymore. It was city status, and it had grown exponentially after the American Revolution. Newport was not the capital, but it was by far the most populous, most industrious town at the time until after the American Revolution when the British left. The province kind of came up into its own in this area and outgrew its town status.
You know where Snowtown was?
What's that?
Where
So Snowtown is relatively where there's actually been archaeological studies recently on it and a panel where the State House is now. That was a hill, and that was kind of like I don't want to say slums, but it was the poor section of Providence at that time. Although the riots kind of take off in the harbor section of Providence. So this is actually interesting. This is one of my favorite documents in the city archives. That is an emergency piece of legislation that came out calling for a town meeting from the town council on the night of riots. It was actually described at 2 a.m. in the morning. On the morning of the next day, Sunday, 25th of September, a town meeting was held. The resolutions of any occasion approving courts of civil magistrature passed, believing that this event grew out of the inefficiency of town government. The Freemen in town meeting assembled the 5th day of October and unanimously resolved to be expedient to adopt a city government. This is when we get our first mayor, a board of aldermen, and a common council. So a little bit about our first charter. So now we're getting into a more recognizable territory to the charter we have today, although there has been vast changes as you'll see going forward. But when Providence was incorporated as a city, the bicameral legislature was created and comprised of an upper body, the Board of Aldermen. These were like, think of the House and Senate. The alderman was like the Senate, and they were like the elder statesmen. And they were a cabinet actually under the mayor. So the mayor would meet with the board. And they tended to be the more conservative, money snooty types, right? The common council was more for the common man, and you'll see this going forward. The term city council was used only when the 2 bodies met jointly. Originally, there were only 6 wards. Each were elected 1 person to the board of aldermen, 4 later 3 to the common council. Over time, number of wards grew eventually 7 to 13. At its greatest point, total number of legislatures for the city of Providence was 52. And you can imagine in the 1870s, when this building was constructed, how packed the chambers were at one point and the alderman chambers. I can't even imagine what it was like when they all met as one body too. That's a proposed charter. So they were actually proposing a charter even before the midst of the Snowtown riot, but let's just say it was expedited once that event occurred. So I know this is lengthy, I apologize, but this is important as we go forward. So throughout 1832, the charter stayed the same. There was amendments done. The city grew, departments were added. A police department was formed in 1853. Fire department was formed in 1853. A former police department in 1864. The number grew in aldermen and councilors. But the charter was old and outdated. By 1940, it was clear it was outdated. But it goes down to politics at the state level. Remember when I said that the city and the state are intertwined? Well, you'll see this in this bloodless revolution and how it created a new city charter. So in 1940, a new city charter was passed that eliminated the Board of Aldermen and renamed the Common Council the City Council. Each elected 2 council members, creating a 26-person legislature. This was part of a larger movement to provide a stronger mayor as the city's executive with increased appointive and administrative powers. This became a more mayoral-centric charter. The new city charter, the new city charter, I lost my place. Theodore F. Green defeated Republican Governor Norman S. Case in 1932. The Democrat Peter G. Jerry received two terms in the U.S. Senate before the Depression, reclaimed his former seat by defeating incumbent Republican Senator Felix Herbert. In the state Senate elections in 1934, 2 seats were contested, both held by Republicans, but Democratic victories in these districts would create Democratic Party majority in the Senate. Lieutenant Governor Robert Quinn, assigned to preside over seating the newly elected state senators, refused to seat the Republicans who claimed re-election to those 2 seats. Green demanded a recount January 1st, 1935, and the recount determined that the Democratic candidates in both districts had won by narrow margins. This had become known as the bloodless revolution, as Republicans have struggled to regain power in Rhode Island ever since. So this turned everything on its head, including our charter, the way it trickled down from the state and affected us directly. Since 1864, since Mayor Doyle, the government in Rhode Island and Providence in particular had been ruled by the Republican Party. Although you'll see common councilors coming in as Democrats. Mayor Gaynor came in and was a progressive candidate in the 1920s and made reforms. But the coup happened in 1940. Everything shifted, and it was a drastic shift. So the changes in state legislative became reflected in the city government 5 years later. The Democratic coup since roughly 1864. As Democratic candidates began to take office in the municipal level by 1940, changes occurred to eliminate prior Republican control through the abolition of the Alderman city charter. Sorry, that was a mouthful. All right, on to the next slide. So this comes from a really neat scrapbook in the city archives, and I'll pass it around. I believe it was actually Mayor Roberts' scrapbook. Well, at the time, he would have been Democratic candidate chairman. Records all the history essentially here. It's a beautiful piece of history. So these are the 11 committee members. So they had 11 committee members in 1940. Joseph H. Gaynor, as I said, the progressive candidate, served 7 terms from 1913 to 27. He did school reform. He was responsible for the Situate Reservoir and our modern day water system. Dennis J. Roberts, as you know, he was the chairman at the time of the Democratic Committee, but became mayor in 1941 to 51. And then, of course, Senator John O. Pastore. Those are the Republicans there that participated in the committee. For the sake of time, we'll skip on their background. Click one more ahead. So they helped draft the charter. Again, some more appointees. The only female appointee on here was Annie Hill Young. She was a member of the Republican State Central Committee. She was the husband of Arthur L. Young, who was a president and treasurer of the Paper Manufacturers Company in Providence. And she was a well-known concert pianist at the time. We also have pastor of the First Methodist Church and born in Ireland, in Belfast, Ireland, Samuel A. Livingston, who was a member appointed to that committee as well. Next slide. And here's a great picture of them all. Story to the left. You see Quinn there. You see Amy Hill, I believe it's Amy Hill, signing into Bill, the Providence City Charter, the 1940 charter. So the charter was signed into effect in 1940, but the Board of Aldermen was allowed to finish out their term until the 5th of January to 1941, and they were eliminated. So, the next one. Here's Roberts with the kids, trying to get them hip with the new charter. There he is. I thought that would be a conclusion in there.
18,000.
Yeah, if you want to take a minute and read one. Yep. Yeah, you gotta remember too, the population in Providence was vastly larger, and that's why you have so many representatives. We reached peak population, 250,000 people in 1925.
How many?
250,000 by 1925. The post-war era, we had the greatest out-migration of any population per capita, what they call the Great Flight. Everyone left for the suburbs. And that affects, again, that's another catalyst that affects development of city government going forward. So this relatively lasts for a while, but numbers shrink, the number of representatives shrink. And I'll show a reflection of that. I have a chart over time. So you have less representatives going forward. So this lasts roughly for 40 years, this new charter. But again, it was time for overhaul. I think this charter was reflective of that time period, but I don't think anyone participated how vastly things would change in the post-World War II era. And you can see that in other areas, which I won't get into tonight, because it doesn't go into the charter so much, but in urban redevelopment and things of that nature. So next slide. So it brings us to our home rule charter. So 1980 comes along, and it's time for change. Providence has changed quite drastically. So before we begin, what is a home rule charter? Well, a home rule gives citizens at the grassroots level the authority to manage their own government affairs. This is done by the adoption of a charter which defines the structure of government. The charter can be changed by the vote of the citizens. Added by a constitutional amendment in 1951, Rhode Island towns and cities have the right to enact regulations without the permission of the General Assembly. 30 cities and towns in Rhode Island presently have home rule charters. I thought this was interesting. So this is the Charter Commission in June of 1980, and there's 9 committee members, which is more reflective of today. So the woman in the middle row left, Evelyn B. Fargnoli, is a powerhouse in, I think, in our history, specifically the city council. Not only being the first female city council president, but what she did and her time and place in the city's history. She was a treasurer of the commission at that time period. And this is the charter's first community hearing in Washington Park Community Center. This is an image from the Providence Journal. That is the council chambers before the major renovation. That's what the old asbestos tile that was in there that they removed. So the chandelier was there.
And where's that chandelier now?
That's what I'd like to know.
It was, I understand it was sold during the World War II. It was melted down.
Sure, no,
But
it's there.
yeah, there is
Yeah,
a
but what's
chandelier.
that? What's the date?
Unless
of
that is
picture?
not the original chandelier.
Wow. What's the date of that picture?
That date is 1980.
Really?
That's from, yep,
All right, well,
but that's probably not the original chandelier. That's probably a reproduction.
There was a proposal, it was gonna cost 50,000 about 15, 20 years ago to reconstruct the original,
wow.
to redo it, so it can be remade, because I think there's
Yeah,
pictures of it and they might be planning.
I think we have drawings
I
too.
digress, I'm sorry. I just.
No, it's an
Like,
interesting.
where's that? That's 1980. Where's that? Where's that?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, there's a lot of,
I didn't think it was there in 1980, I thought.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
During the war.
No worries. I mean, it's an interesting topic for sure. So this new charter was a 15-member, 15-ward system that went into effect in '83 after the passage of the Home Rule Charter was approved by the voters in 1980. The main rationale for reducing the size of the council was the argument that a 26-person legislature is unwieldy given the decrease in city's population since 1940. As I said, great out-migration. it wasn't reflective of the population at the time. So this reduced the number of council members to 15 and brought the council person to constituent ratio to about 1 to 10,000 approximately, the same as it had been when the 26-member system was enacted in 1940. The decision on the city council would be comprised, was made as a compromise between minority groups who sought to increase the number of wards in hopes of creating a more diverse legislature, and those who wanted a smaller council in hopes of overcoming parochial neighborhood interests. A number of the proposals were defeated, including a plan for 18 members from 9 wards, 18 members from 18 wards, 13 members from 13 wards, and 18 members from 13 wards with 5 elected at large. Does that sound familiar? So even then, they were thinking of at-large members.
I was gonna say one thing.
Mhm.
It seems like they weren't paying attention, because having 18, it seems like you'd rather have an odd number than a.
Mhm.
That, think about that for a second.
Sure.
You literally have stalemate potentially all the time. So I mean, it's surprising, you know.
Yeah,
They were doing an even number. You kind of always want an odd
it makes
number.
no sense.
You know,
That and the
makes more
constituent
difference,
ratio.
right? They make it 19 members. That's what I'm saying, you know?
Mhm.
I'm just mentioning.
No, yeah, it's interesting. There was a lot of debate on the floor about that. So here's a good little cheat sheet I use. It needs to be updated. I'm working on that. Because it ends around 2005 and I want to go up to present. But you can see how the ward numbers have changed, the Board of Aldermen changed, and then the drastic changes, including the 1940 charter that was adopted down to the 1980 Homeworld charter. So what we currently use today is the Homeworld charter. So we essentially, our charter was born in 1980, came to effect in 83. And this committee is a reflection of that, going forward, adding, amending, making changes. So that's where we are today. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot. I had to abbreviate some of it, but I'm more than happy to try to answer those questions as best I can.
Question?
Fascinating journey. Thank you, Mr. Knight.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I mean, Caleb, if I can just commend you on the thoroughness and your obvious passion
Yeah.
on what you're researching and relaying to us and to everybody else. And I'm sure you can continue talking on all of this, and that's what I really like about.
I would
you.
like to mention too, that chart was courtesy of Nick Freeman. Nick Freeman did a wonderful research project with that and was a help for me with that.
Can we get
And I'd like
copies
to
of that
continue
slide?
his work.
I was
What's
just
that?
gonna ask the
Can we
same.
get copies of that?
Yeah, sure, yeah, but that was courtesy of Nick Freeman, so I just want to point that out. So, a friend of mine.
One we shall
Yeah,
understand
former-
every detail of that.
I
Shitty
completely
boy.
agree. And I think it just underscores the importance of what this is. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right,
Exactly.
yeah.
and I think as Caleb pointed out, one of the key features of this is it's a home rule charter by the Providence,
That's
as
right.
opposed to 1940 was approved by the state legislature.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So that was a water. event.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Very good.
I'm more than happy to help. I could provide that chart. I'm gonna update it.
Yeah, great.
And I'll provide it to the board, or the committee rather, and, any other history I can help. Feel free to check out the exhibit space on the 3rd floor. We have the 1832 charter out there. You can see, some portraits of aldermen. You can see a city council from 1953, and we have the, founding documents case, which I have to thank the council president for being very involved with that, and, what a way to showcase the archives pieces and the history of the founding of our city. And very proud that the council can do that. It's been a blast. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
I know, right?
Yeah, right.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You did a great job. You know, you've always done a great job for the
Thank
council,
you.
for the people of Providence. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions, commission members? Okay. All right, so next item is item number 2, and includes an overview from the water department.
Let's go to you today.
I'm sorry,
Let's go to you today.
Mr. Sheverini?
Yes, sir.
Can Just very quickly,
I can give a brief overview.
do you want to give an overview, or are you prepared, or do you want to go a little more deep?
I was just reading the charter. I think I'm prepared enough. So are you ready, Mr. Chair?
Sure. Item number 2, a review from the Law Department. Deputy Solicitor Kenny Cheverini, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Article 3 of the Rhode Island Constitution grants all cities and towns the right to self-government in local matters. So accordingly, in 1980, as was pointed out, the voters of the city of Providence adopted the first city home rule charter. And I know there was talk about charters prior to that, but first city home rule charter to regulate the operations of government. So I think, Mr. Chair, as you've pointed out previously, this is the constitution of the city of Providence. The charter, Providence Charter, describes the powers and duties of the mayor, city council, the municipal courts, various appointed officers. It lays out the municipal departments, boards, and commissions, as well as the city's fiscal and budgetary procedures. There's sections on election processes, as well as the personnel system. Section 1302 of the charter specifically requires that every 10 years, and it started in 1992, a charter review commission shall be convened to review the operation of the charter and to make recommendations via amendments. The Charter Review Commission has a maximum period of 8 months to complete its work and submit that report with recommendations to the Providence City Council. The commission itself has no authority to enact any charter amendments. And as the members know, there's 9 members, 5 appointed by the city council, 4 appointed by the mayor. The city council would then, after receiving this report and recommendation, would then place the proposed charter amendments on a ballot in the, scheduled for the next general election for approval by the voters. And typically what has happened over the years, the commission would hold meetings, solicit recommendations, not only from the council or the mayor, there would be solicitations from various departments, as well as the general public. And that would entail many meetings, discussion, which would be compiled into a report and recommendation, and then submitted to the council for approval.
Thank you.
And the charter deals with operations, as I mentioned, operations of government, not things about changing fines or various regular things that would be addressed by an ordinance. This is the structure of government and the operation of government. And that's why it would need a change by the voters of the city of Providence.
Commissioner, do you have any questions? Mr. Cheverini?
You did a nice job.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think we'll move on to the next item, item number 3, which is Yvonne Graff. Yvonne, you have the mic. I think, do you have something you're going to pass out? What do we have?
I believe the clerk has already passed out the slide deck that I'm going to go through.
So what we're going to do is
along
this,
with
how many
the-
pages? And
It's
how many pages?
how many pages? It's much shorter than the city archivist's presentation, if that's
So
what you're
what we'll do
asking.
So-
We're gonna go through it really fast,
This we're gonna
lightning
do.
speed.
We're gonna, first of all, for the record, it's an 8-page slide deck created by Yvonne Graff. It's entitled City of Providence Charter Review Commission 2022. With the market as Exhibit A. I'm gonna make it Exhibit 1 because there's probably a lot of exhibits. So make it Exhibit 1 and then carry on. Exhibit 1, motion to market Exhibit 1. So moved by Vice Chair.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Castillo. Discussion, all in favor? Madam Clerk, for the record, item 1A. Madam Graff, you have the mic, and take us through your deck.
Thank you very much. So this is a preliminary work plan and cadence for the work of the commission. So very much up for discussion and input. And of course, we have to continue to be flexible and adaptable. We're in the time of COVID. So all of our best laid plans and schedules have somewhat had to been altered, but here we go. These are the recommendations as of the moment. So as you start the work, and as you'll see in the slides that are coming up, the schedule is presented in a way that is by subject area and department.
That's this schedule. Here? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
exactly.
So for the commission members, there's another proposed schedule, has 1, 2, it's like 4 pages. We'll mark it as exhibit 2. Motion by Vice Chair, second by Councilman Castillo.
Second.
Discussion. So this exhibit 2, and Sophia, can look to that, and you want to go to that?
Yep, sure. So yeah, so the plan for each committee meeting will be to, and you can go ahead on the slide deck also, to discuss each subject area with a content area specialist. That would most likely be the department head, department representatives, city solicitor, other area experts. And the way that I have chosen to organize the meetings is by department and function area of the city charter. So it is not chronological in order of the charter, because the way the charter is laid out, there are departments and functions that relate to each other, but they're not laid out in the charter in that manner. So this is the way that made sense logically to me, but obviously commission members, you have to give your input into that. Go ahead to the next slide. As you're reviewing the sections in preparation for each meeting, obviously you'll just want to make notes, make edits wherever you see necessary. And I did want to highlight, really also look for what's missing in a section in an article, because it's not only what needs to get changed, but maybe there are things that haven't been anticipated that now need to be included. And recommending any organizational and functional changes that really it's all about making the charter more accessible, more understandable, more streamlined for the average city resident and stakeholders to access. And then I went ahead on the next slide and just put together a few guiding principles that you may want to keep in mind as you're going through this process. How well does the city charter reflect and uphold the city's responsibility to self-governance? That's as the city solicitor and the city archivist mentioned, is under the Rhode Island Constitution now for Homeworld Charter. And moving forward, how can we continue to make sure that the charter is equitable, inclusive, and really gives access to all Providence residents, public servants, and everyone who works, lives, and visits here? What is the vision for the next decade and beyond for the city of Providence? What are the systemic challenges we will face? And how can we leverage the resources at our disposal to create a new future for the city? And how do we want the city's constitution, the city charter to reflect that? And then any other ideas about your guiding principles as work, please add in as we go along. So with that, we can get into the meat of the schedule as I'm proposing it. Feel free to jump in anytime with questions or clarification. So what's up on the screen is also in that separate handout that you have with the schedule. Yeah. So we're starting off with the basic provisions and elections. I made a note here that we won't get into at-large discussion at this session, but that'll be at a later date, but this will be looking at the foundations of the government and elections. Then for the next meeting, we would move into, and these dates are all subject to change. And I know we've discussed having some Monday meetings, But right now, these are all just scheduled for the regular Wednesday night meetings. The next meeting would be the branches of governance, the mayor, the city council, and the courts of the city. So these are, so far, we're all chronological. This is Articles 1 through 5 of the charter. Then we're gonna jump ahead a little bit to Article 8 and get into the budget and the finance department. One of the reasons for that is because the finance department and all the budget folks are gonna be getting deep into budget season and preparing the budget. So we wanna get them in and get their feedback relative to their work in their departments earlier and as early as we can. From there, and this is where we really jump ahead because the next section that I think would be important for us to look at is Article 12, which is the general provision section, which gets into the basic commitments and organizational foundations of the city. So this is like, what are the requirements to be and responsibilities to be a department director, to what are the general rules associated with being on a board and commission, what are kind of the ethics and the foundations for government. So before getting into all of the departments and boards and commissions, this kind of sets the foundation of how they should be operating and what the ideals are for our departments and boards. From there, we go into the personnel department again, kind of continuing that overarching foundation of operations for the city. And then looking at some of the specified appointed officers that are called out in the city charter. Some of them are by term, some of them are listed as serving at the pleasure of the mayor. These include the city solicitor, city clerk, city treasurer, recorder of deeds, vital statistics registrar, city sergeant. So those are all grouped together. From there, we could go into the Board of Licenses. I know we've already gotten some feedback from the chairman of the Board of Licenses as to some recommendations for amendments. And it seemed like a good idea to pair this up with Department of Public Safety because there's so much overlap with police issues relative to licensing in the city. Public safety, of course, also includes fire department, communications, and emergency management. So that would all be grouped together. Then we move into parks and recreation, as well as the Dexter Donation Commission and the Human Relations Commission. And you can see like a lot of these nights are really heavy. We've got a lot to go through, but when you look at the schedule, when we get to the end, we're already pushing into the end of April with everything we have to go through. So for the end of March, we'd be looking at the Providence Housing Authority and the Providence Redevelopment Agency, all of the planning areas. So the Department of Planning and Development, the City Plan Commission, the Comprehensive Plan, and the Port Commission. Another session would be bundling together Public Works, Traffic Engineering, Inspection and Standards, and the Boards of Review for Zoning, Housing, and Building. Water Supply Board, Public Property, and Board of Contract and Supply would be next. And for last but not least, I saved the school department. Obviously, as we know, it's under state oversight at this time. However, all school board members are still appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. And of course, as of right now, we do anticipate that this will come under city governance once more. And there's certainly always a lot of lively discussion about elected versus appointed school boards. And then just the final sections of this charter review process that you're in and the transitional provisions. And then from there on your schedules, I also have sort of the remaining schedules of meetings that would include the early recommendations of the commission, some additional sessions that are targeted for special discussion, if there are areas that you want more research on, or separate presentations on, in addition to the at-large. Those would be covered then, as well as digging into early versions of the draft report of recommendations, and with the goal of having the vote by the commission and recommendations to the council by the end of May, May 25th. This would allow the council to hold public hearing and vote on the charter recommendations by early July, so that would give us time to get the ballot questions to the State Board of Elections by early August, which is required in order for them to make it onto the November ballot. So that is the journey. I also included, you flip ahead, a schedule for the community sessions. And looking ahead to those in hopefully March. Having 4 of those. These were just some general ideas about how we could bundle by subject area to kind of make it a little bit easier for members of the public to be able to digest and prepare and look through different sections. Definitely would love anyone who wants to kind of be on a subcommittee to help plan and facilitate the community sessions and recommendations from everyone in terms of community groups and stakeholders who want to engage and make part of those sessions. And then finally, on the last slide, I just have our website that has the City Charter Commission webpage, which we will continue to build out, include more information on meetings and all of the work that you all are doing. All of the meetings and minutes and agendas are, of course, on the open meetings portal. This is an email address that we have set up specific for City Charter, so you can share that with members of the public and anyone who wants to give input or ask questions. citycharter@providenceri.gov, and of course, my information. And so I certainly welcome feedback, thoughts, questions, needs for changes. I will, of course, once we finalize schedule, get this all out to all of you on email as well.
So just for some part, especially the community sessions, so it's hoping that commission members maybe take an initiative to like be the spokesperson, person to help run that one. This way kind of lead some of the burden on everybody, we all can get a little interaction. That's okay, like, be the facilitator of that meeting. We have 4 schedule, it doesn't have to be those dates. You can work around those dates based on your schedule too. Let's say if Mr. Richie says we can do one, but we can't do one date, but the date he can, well, we'll just rework that time and date. So, but if I'd ask if the available on the commissions, if you all jump in that strong with us and maybe take one of those meetings, hopefully. Okay? And then if you just want to do Ms. Graff, because she's gonna be managing us. She's gonna be managing this process for us. And so everything will flow through her, and then go to her and then come out to all of us, all right?
I could certainly do
Commissioner
the
Richie?
Mr. Chairman. I'm willing to do, what day of the week is the 7th?
That is a Monday, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine. I'm willing to do the 7th.
great.
The commissioners, you can see the date. Work
I'm gonna
on
line up and go on that.
if you want another different date.
Okay.
I'm gonna line up and do on the 7th.
Okay,
I can also do the 21st for city department.
great.
I'll do two.
Thank you.
March 28th will work.
Great. You do 28th. Thank you, Commissioner.
We'll be down on the 21st also.
Okay, great.
So we have
These are Mondays, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
these are Mondays.
Anybody could do a 14th? Yeah,
So I'm happy to jump in on any ones.
would you mind, I think 14th still available, could you do that? Commissioner Pandy will do the 14th. And then, of course, by the way, if the commission want to join it too, but
I was just
if
gonna
you
say,
take the point, it's fantastic. you know?
Right.
And-
So you're really asking one of us to,
Well,
be the moderator.
Be the moderator, facilitate,
Okay.
participate so they can see the commissioners. They see that we're out there, we're trying to.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, we're gonna do it via Zoom, correct?
I think we're doing Zoom, right, at this time,
Right now, we're doing
Yeah,
it over
doing
Zoom,
Zoom.
yeah.
okay? Because of,
Well, because of COVID, but regardless, since we're not taking action, we could do Zoom.
yes,
Even though
exactly,
the state of emergency could expire and, all
exactly.
that.
Because it's not an official charter review commission meeting. It's just a, what do you call it, outreach.
Right.
So it's not part of the open meeting laws.
I'm
Yeah,
fine
I
with Zoom, I'm
My
fine
correct-
going someplace.
Deputy Solicitor, am I correct on that?
That's correct. You could hold the meeting. It's not a meeting where you're going to take action. It could just be a regular neighborhood meeting, however you hold it. I mean, the governor's order wouldn't pertain to that as far as the suspension of the Open Meetings Act, and the Open Meetings Act wouldn't apply.
Thank you. I do see two hands, can I, as
Sure.
you Commissioner, I see Deputy Majority Leader Mary Kay Harris, did you have your hand up?
Yes,
I
I think this is a great opportunity to ask the question about adding other boards and commissions. Is this the time to do it within this commission? I'm gonna use an example. For years, we have been talking about PARA also becoming Providence External Review Authority, also becoming a part of the city charter if it's gonna operate as a quasi government board.
So we can do it.
I'm sorry, my computer does that. It
Oh.
just shuts me off. It mutes me for no reason. But anyways, back to
problem.
what I was asking, in case you didn't hear. I was asking in reference to the Providence External Review Authority. And how do you add, I mean, at what point do we have is this the commission that we have conversations about if we wanted to add another commission or another authority to the Homeworld Charter, would this be the avenue to do it?
Yeah, I mean, if you would like to do that, so what I would suggest is, I mean, tonight, but if you want, formulate what your proposal is, get it to Ms. Graff, and then she'll start, putting it in the hopper, and then you can start, and then we can invite whoever from, if it's para, wants to present what their idea is and stuff like that, they can coordinate Ms. Graff and they can, with the clerk, and they can come in and make a presentation. Okay, so we can do that. All
Okay,
right.
my second question is, maybe I didn't hear well because of the background. You all wearing masks as well. So did I hear that the charter also will be voted on by the voters, our voters?
Yeah, what will happen is after the Charter Review Commission does its recommendations, then the recommendations get forwarded to the city council. The council can take some of the recommendations, don't take any recommendations, modify the recommendations, and then the council then votes to go put it on the November ballot. And then the voters decide whether or not to approve those charter changes.
Okay. And that's what we're doing. We're looking at these different, say for instance, these different departments and
Yes.
offering recommendation according to what?
Well, according to need, or there's a need for it, like, if we want to, modify the role of a particular department and say they should do this or that, or maybe they shouldn't do that, I don't know, or, should a person who gets appointed stays in the position in perpetuity, for example? Should we allow that to continue to happen? Should a person, those kinds of things. So so everything's kind of everything's, up for conversation. And then if it makes sense, then the commission can put forward a recommendation to the council.
Everybody has a voice.
Yeah.
Thank
Does that
you.
help?
I definitely wanted to know how in depth we could go at this point because it's only every 10 years. And so if there's opportunity, I think we should take that chance right now
This
as
is
a
it.
community and leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Majority Leader Mary Kay Harris.
You guys got a lot of work.
Yeah.
We have Councilwoman Helen Anthony. Councilwoman, you have your hand?
Yes, thank you very much, Council President and members of the committee. I guess I'd like to express my concern for how rapidly this is moving. I mean, if we're talking about going out to the public for their opinion in March and we're at the end of January, how are we going to compile our list of possible changes and educate the public and get, constructive feedback in such a short time? So I'd just like to know your thoughts.
That's a great question. I think we're at the stage first of people reviewing and coming up with ideas and recommendations. This commission just makes recommendations. And then the next stage would be the city council will then receive the recommendations. And the council would then do public hearings and further public discourse. And then the council would then decide on a voting measure whether or not to move forward on a proposed recommendation or not. So this is the idea of putting together, collating all the different ideas and then putting it into a big package and then forwarding to the city council. So the public outreach is, public may have charter changes they have in mind now, so we're trying to get their ideas now. But they're gonna have numerous opportunity through this process and through the council's public hearing process before anything goes to the voters.
Right, Mr. Chairman, I
Commissioner Ritchie?
think I would add, we don't want to propose changes until we hear from the public. And then we will take the public's comments into consideration. And when we deliberate the changes, so those initial meetings, we're just going to take in information to probably formulate
And how are you?
for changes at the end of the process. After we hear from the departments, hear from the public. Then the council weighs in, and then there'll be more public hearings where the public can weigh in again, and then the public ultimately weighs in on election day.
Right, they make a decision. The public decides.
Well,
The public makes the final decision.
may I just say, may I just express my concern? I just think there's also an education piece. People need to be educated on the charter and what the possibilities are for change within the charter. And so I just am not sure how that, just to hold, some public meetings on the charter, without really having time to educate and explain what it is and the whole 9 yards. I just don't know how we're going to get constructive feedback.
Well, we're gonna try to do the best we can. We are mirroring what has done in the past, but also under the constraints of COVID and that process. So we're gonna try to do the best we can and get as much information out to the public. But we do have tools today that didn't exist back in 1980, from the internet, from YouTube, from all this other stuff. So there's a lot, and I remember way back when, unfortunately, I was young lad, and I remember the 1980s, I remember that time. So I remember back then, it was only the journal. There was only one source of any information, was the journal, and that was it. So I think we're definitely involved in technology. We're gonna do everything we can to utilize all those resources and get out there. And I know we're doing invites and mailings, and we're doing everything we possibly can. It's a process. It's tough. We're gonna try and make sure it's as inclusive and informative as possible. And I know these charter commission members, extremely capable individuals, and I'm sure they're all gonna help with that too. Ms. Graff, do you have a statement?
Yeah, I just
also-
had. Go ahead.
Councilwoman, Madam
I'm
Graff?
sorry.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just going to add to that, as part of the recommendation from Commissioner Panday and some other commissioners at the last meeting, we are looking into translating, if not the entire charter, at least certain sections of it in preparation for the community outreach. So we are going to be looking into the cost of contracting with some translation firms. It's obviously a very large document, and there is a lot of technical language, so we do want to make it as accessible to people in their first languages. So we will be looking into that, but certainly Spanish and potentially other languages, depending on feasibility.
Commissioner Panday?
Thank you, Council President. I also think that if we, as the committee, will agree to these dates, then we can at least immediately get some save the dates to let people know. And if we can have them email, or if there's that one place where we can maybe say, sign up for updates, and then we continuously push updates out and maybe do a little synthesis on what each of these sections entails and where they tap back to the Homeworld Charter as part of our education. And I also think, and I'm going to go back to Caleb's presentation, like there's so much richness as to why this is important. And I think we've got to tell the people the why, right? Why should you get involved? And how do we give a little like 4-sentence, summary on each of these dates in the content that's going to be discussed. But if we can put up the save the date with at least these topics and just start circulating to get people familiar with it, give them a month's time to get it on their calendar. And I'd be happy to work with Ms. Rapp on looking at some type of a marketing strategy so that we can use this as that moment of education. And whatever we push out, again, I believe the linguistic relevance is going to play into that as well.
We also plan on gonna allocate money, we'll have the money to get, do that type of advertisement campaign. We have spoken about it, which is getting to the newspapers, the Latino papers, all those kinds of aspects, getting it out sooner. And listen, it's tough, and it's a short time frame, but we'll do the bill if we can. Like I said, these are the dates, the commissioners are committed to it. Then we now set them, then we start advertising, we start educating. So we're gonna do a lot. I know we talked about that. So, we're just not going to wait. We're gonna be very proactive. So thank you. Commissioner Montague?
We agree to these dates.
That's what I'm
It sounds like we just did. That's why I brought it up to it. So if you guys are good with it, then now we
Take a
can.
motion on it, or we just.
I don't know. if you have
Mr.
to
Chair?
take a vote on it.
Yes,
Mr. Chair,
excuse me, sit up. Sure.
I know the dates are very ambitious, but I want to remind you, this commission has 8 months from the date of appointment to submit their report and recommendation. And then you have 90 days prior to the November election, which brings you the first November 10th, I think, Yvonne, to get that to the Secretary of State to get that on the ballot. So, and in between, you get the city council that's got to act. So you don't have a lot of time. I know we think in 8 months, but
Right, this is what I want to
That's
agree
what I'm
to
going
the dates.
to, exactly.
So let's start the date. If the commissioner's good with those dates, we can begin.
Yeah, that's fine with those.
Yeah. So then I think we're good. So that helped you, I'm clerk and Ms. Kraft. So then now we can begin that process of getting advertised, getting notices, getting the newspapers, all the different languages and working on them. So.
Council
Commissioner Penny?
President, if I may also, if we are thinking Zoom only, and I'm fine with that, so we need to make sure that we have all of the ADA compliance with the Zoom sessions, making sure we have the translation room set up, and then also for feedback sessions, if there's a way to incorporate, if there's any survey of feedback that needs to happen. And then I also wanted to know, because we are looking at these dates, and it is an aggressive timeline, and it is a Monday night, as we look to make sure we have things like childcare, transportation, all the stuff that we talked about at our last meeting, is there also kind of a suggestion box that'll be open for a set period of time where people can email or send in their recommendations, and maybe that stay open for 30 days or something like that.
I think it's a great idea. Maybe what we do is actually open a suggestion box now and just keep it open.
That's what
Like,
I'm working
don't
on.
even do it, just so, if
Right.
Ms. Graff, you could work on that and then just give something we can start advertising now. Like,
Absolutely.
and just start rolling with it, which I think is a great idea.
And then as these topics, as this committee contemplates these topic areas, if there are those recommendations that are coming in the tag to it, we can consider it in the moment, or again, a reconciliation of all those recommendations at the end, just simply because I know Zoom, while helpful, it also can be a deterrent, and I worry about folks where they may not have the technology, they may not have, access, they may not be in a space where they can contribute. And so I just feel like there needs to be a few other opportunities to solicit community input.
Could I prevail upon Ms. Graff and Ms. Penny to coordinate the next week or so, and what could be a way to create this kind of advertising campaign and, notice and outreach campaign? Is that, and the commissioner would like to help out, and I think it'd be And then you can present something like this, what we're gonna do, and then we'll figure out where we get the money and move forward. And I'm, well, you know, I'm sure the council will be more than happy to help out with that. I cannot imagine not. You know? Mr. City Solicitor, do you have any other questions, sir?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're expediting, getting our archival documents digitized and online, able to view, going back the last 40 years, actually going back to 1980, on both the Charter Commission review records, and I also have ward boundary records too. And we want that in the digital archive collection, so it'd be a way to kind of advertise that. I know it wouldn't be, I don't know, what I'm looking for, but it's a way to maybe bring in the community from our end, the historical end.
Commissioner?
Yeah, I just have a request that if, as you are creating a marketing strategy, if you can ensure that we all sort of get a look at it,
Well, yes.
we may be able to have some other ideas. or
Well,
ways to
what I
make
suggest
it-
is if you could, it's not gonna, I asked Commissioner Kennedy, of course, you, all three work together. This is a group effort, so you don't have to wait until someone presents, jump in the scrum and contact Commissioner, Mr. Graff and Kenny and set some times up and talk about how you guys can, you know, do a brainstorming session. Or, you know, and then put where you think is a good idea, present it, and go. I think it's capable, you know, you folks, that's what, so this isn't about knowing, everybody jump in. You have an idea about something on the outreach? Ms. Graff, no, it's, you know, this is what it's about. I think it's a great question, Councilman Anthony mentioned, and, you know, we need to talk some more about it. I know we talked about it, now we'll get even deeper into it. So,
Of course.
Commissioner Montague.
As we go along and talk about at large council, you're gonna provide us with some research and data regarding that?
Yes, I won't be personally, but I will make sure that the right people who are knowledgeable and have researched will be coming before the committee to present.
Really?
Yeah.
And then I also, you also have to actually presume connect, I don't know if you noticed, I did notice how at one time, one council person would represent 600, almost 600 people. And it was really interesting watching that chart. And I know now, right now, the council represents about maybe 11,000, 12,000 people. Now with the new population, it's probably gonna be almost 13,000. So it looks like, you know, the population is ticking up again. So then maybe, actually, we need to probably know what the census is. Get some census information about the population, right? So that's probably something we're gonna need for that further conversation. Commissioner Montague just mentioned about.
Yes, and it'll be interesting timing because board boundaries and redistricting is happening concurrently to this process. So it'll be, you know, timely conversation for the at-large
Sure.
discussion as well, so.
So, is it,
I
Commissioner?
just have,
Kennedy?
I'm
Sure,
sorry, Council
problem.
President, you're either gonna love having me on this committee or you're
No,
gonna
no.
hate having me on this committee. I have another question, this is
Sure.
just as we're talking about recommendations and stuff. Through the pandemic, have there been any learnings that have challenged the way that government operates under the
Yes.
current Homeworld Charter?
Yes,
And is there a single repository of where those recommendations are? And once Ms. Rath figures out how to get this uploaded online system, can we make sure that we're thinking about that? That it's challenged so much of the way that we're thinking in the systems. And so I just want to make sure that that is documented somewhere so we can chew on that as we think about this, you know, every 10 years making these recommendations. I know I have my share of experiences, so I just love to know from the internal kind of work that we have something that we should be considering.
Absolutely.
Okay.
any other comments, questions for commissioners? I hope, thank you, by the way, presentations were excellent. And, you know, and keep moving along, I mean, and I presume hopefully, Madam Graff, you can contact the commissioners and start figuring out what that, you know, advertising outreach package could be, and we can start working on that.
The schedule is very helpful.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I think this is.
Great job, by the way, excellent job.
So I can send that schedule out, understanding it's still gonna be tentative because, you
We
know,
need to do,
but I'll send it out as a tentative schedule just as a reference point for all of you to have to work from, and we'll continue to be flexible with it.
All right, if there's no other further comments, questions, are there?
No.
Okay, do I have a
Motion
motion?
to adjourn.
Motion by
Second.
Commissioner Ritchie, second by Commissioner. Want to do discussion? All in favor? Thank you all. Aye. And thank you all for joining. Claire?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's real, talk about real. That's just what it is.
Charter.
Absolutely.